Hello and welcome to the 15th edition of e-Dialogue series organized by Urban Update, All India Institute of Local Self-Government and UCLG ASPEC. COVID-19 situation is in India is getting worsened by the day. A trend that started late in July, and if we take the figure from say 1st of August to 1st of September, that is 32 days, we have seen a jump of 217%. From about 17 lakhs on 1st of August, the number of positive cases jumped to almost 37 lakhs on 1st of September. More than 1,000 people are losing their lives every day. The fatalities as of today have crossed 75,000. And if the situation is not arrested by the end of September, experts believe that we might hit 65 lakh cases in India. Today itself, in the last 24 hours, the figure till 9:30 a.m. this morning is number of positive cases, 96,000. Active cases in India at the moment is almost 9,20,000. Number of fatalities in last 24 hours is 1,172. And total deaths till now is 75,062. On the last week in India, India's count of positive cases were more than United States and Brazil put together. In terms of numbers, India has now acquired number 2 position in the world after US, leaving Brazil behind. Though the cases of fatalities is still more in Brazil, why is this happening? Are people getting tired and throwing caution to the winds, or numbers are going up because there is more aggressive testing now? Then the question that comes to mind is why it was not done earlier. In June and early July, we were talking about record spike in number of cases when it used to be a little over 15,000. The number sounds minuscule if we compare that with numbers that we have now. There are a lot of questions that begs answer, but are hardly forthcoming. Regular briefings have stopped. Every morning and evening, just numbers are revealed. So the big question is India becoming COVID capital of the world? And to discuss that with us, we have a fantastic panel today. We are joined by Ms. Shailaja Chandra, former Secretary, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India. Dr. Matthew Verghese, he's at St. Stephen's College. He has been on our program earlier as well. A.R. Antony, he's a consultant in public health. He was the founding president of Public Health Resource Network India and retired as Director State Health Resource Center, Chhattisgarh. Dr. Subrata Kundu, he took voluntary retirement when he was working as the Chief Medical Officer in Central Health Services. Before that, he was Medical Officer at Safdarjung Hospital, Deen Dayal Upadhyay and Lok Nayak Jai Prakash Hospital. Dr. Sylvia Karpagam is a public health policy expert and also a public health doctor. She has researched and worked closely with organizations and groups located in India. She is an illustrator as well. The rule of the games are simple. Every panelist will have 3 to 5 minutes for opening comment, and then there will be second round of questions. Those who are participating on Zoom can post their questions on Zoom post, or wave your hand and you can ask the question directly to the panelist. We are also streaming this program on our Facebook page live. Just open your Facebook page and type Urban Update Mag. You can also ask your question on every page and we will put that to our panelists. So let me give word to Ms. Shailata Chandra. Ms. Chandra, I was looking at the global picture till this morning. India is on the second position so far as the number of positive cases are concerned. But yes, uh, all other indicators, whether it is the number of fatalities, active cases, cases per million, deaths per million, and mortality rate. On all these parameters, India is still number 3, but situation is quite alarming. You have been an insider and you are watching the situation from outside now. What is your assessment of the situation? Do you get a sense that people have been left to fend for themselves as no new policy decision is coming to deal with this alarming situation? Ms. Chandra. Ms. Chandra,
That okay?
Ms. Chandra, please go ahead. Did you hear my question?
I heard your question. I was just joking that your question will take 300 minutes to reply if you want to be sincere to the question. But you've given me 3 minutes and I'll try my best.
Three
I
to
am not
5 minutes.
I'm not a supporter of everything the government does. If you look at my blog, who's over to Shailaja, you will find that I am quite a government and establishment baiter. But let me say that with my long experience of public health, right from the time when plague came in 1994 and thereafter, I think that the figures that you give sound alarming, but I think it is very necessary always to look at India in the basket of what is the denominator. Tamil Nadu is the size of France. Germany is the size of Bihar. Italy is the size of Rajasthan. With those population, we have countries. So when you look at the fatality rate, it is still very low compared to other countries if you take per million, not if you take absolute numbers. So that must be factored in whether one is liked for saying this or not. I am not at all holding a candle or brief for the government. My view on that, when you ask me, is the following. I think that the response in March was handled in a, I would say, in a way which was quite unnecessary, putting a lockdown in 4 hours. But the lockdown served a huge purpose. At that time, I did talk to the health secretaries of opposition states so that no one says that one is only talking to the states run by the central government's, you might say, political party. Those states were Chhattisgarh, Odisha, Jharkhand, and I also talked to Rajasthan. All over in these 4 states, by March end, the health secretaries were fully aware of what was COVID, what is required to be done in terms of the steps of detection, quarantining, testing, and then setting up the hospital beds, whether it is in dharamchalas or resorts. I think that that kind of step is evinced by the example of Bhilwara in Rajasthan, which BBC said was the new Italy. On the contrary, in 10 days, they had everything under control. That could not have happened if there wasn't this kind of single-minded attention. So full marks for the attention, very, very poor marks for the way it was done. Coming now to what happens thereafter, when you ask me this question of handling now, the handling is totally in the hands of state governments, and it ought to be because public health is a state subject under the Constitution. Whereas the central government can, and I hope would do much more, but actually the proof of the pudding is at the level of the district magistrates in the rural areas and the chief medical and health officers, and in urban areas, it is largely the municipal corporations. they only work if three things are in position. A, the political executive treats this as a huge priority, number one. Number two, if they are given the tools to work. Number three, all cases of health workers are treated with sympathy, empathy, and the hand-holding is from minute to minute. Then the health workers will do the work that is assigned. I think at a policy level, some states have done well. Delhi was a basket case, but it suddenly was able to get its act together. It shows that when they got egg on their face, they really, really got the act together and were able to do something and bend the curve slightly. Things are going out of hand again, but I think my own feeling is that it'll be about 15, 20 days before the flattening begins, if they are strict about mask wearing and they're strict about testing. But Maharashtra, which was such a well-administered state, except for Mumbai, has become a basket case. Telangana is a basket case. Whereas some of the other states, be it Rajasthan, be it Uttar Pradesh, not Uttar Pradesh, I don't even know whether the figures are correct at all. So my 3 minutes are going up, but I want to conclude by saying the lockdown was absolutely necessary, not the way it was done. The problems with migrants wanting to go back and taking with them the COVID into rural areas was something that should have been anticipated. It was not. But the fact remains there is not a district or a district magistrate who now does not know the drill. He knows exactly what is to be done. If he is not doing it, it is either because the state is not according it priority or the consumables and the PPEs that ought to be in position and the testing kits have not been supplied. That is absolutely a responsibility of the chief minister of the state and the health minister. And certainly, as I gave you examples, some states are doing well, some states are doing very poorly. Karnataka is really a shocking case of having handled things properly and allowed them to go completely haywire, and even now it is haywire. So with my concluding statement only is that I don't think that one should be terribly alarmed by numbers. Numbers in the context of India have to be seen against the denominator, which is our 1.3 billion population, compared to the population of the US, which is about 3 million plus or whatever, and other countries which are having populations of 60 million, 70 million when we compare, we are 1.3 billion. So the fatalities have to be seen in that context. So that's all I want to say right now.
Right. I'm sure the population of European countries, and even for that matter, United States, is 1/3 of what the population of India. But China's population is as big as India's, and we are clocking more number of cases per day than China had in the entire pandemic period of last 9 months. If you look at last 24 hours figure, China has detected just 2 cases. So we'll come to that question of population and that its relation to mortality, positive cases, and all that. Dr. Matthew Varghese, last time when we were having a conversation, you heard Ms. Shailaja Chandra just now. Some states are doing very well, some states are doing very poorly, some states squandered their position. You had said that, you will see sometimes it will go down, then it will go up, then it will come down. But we'll look at the trend from, say, last mid-July and after that. Every day it is going up and up and up for last a month and a half or 2 months, month and a half. It's just going up. Forget about flattening the curve. It's not even going down. Your take, why is it happening?
Yes, first of all, thank you for having me here. And the reason I have my mask on is once I take it on in the morning and I'm coming straight from the outpatient, I don't take it down.
It's all right, yeah.
Till the end of the OPD, till the end of the OPD. No, I'm giving a message. Till the end of the, because there is an answer in this. Because we did see a dip happening somewhere in July. What happened? The lockdown helped keep the curve flat for some time. If you see the graph, I don't have a graph ready-made here. You see the graph is reasonably horizontal. The gradient was reasonably horizontal. Maybe 10 15 degrees slope. But then suddenly it went up, spiked, and after it spiked, it started coming down. So it started coming down, and the down was in July's second week onwards. But the problem that we have now is there is now a second wave, as they say it. Why is the second wave there? We need to understand the dynamics. Dr. Shailaja very clearly explained that we know all that is to be done, but what is happening on the ground level must be understood. Familiarity breeds contempt. In the outpatient, I have a crowded OPD. Everyone has their mouth covered, but the nose. They display their beautiful noses without following all the principles of a covered nose and a covered mouth. And by and large, it is reasonably clear that the spread of the infection is through the nose and the mouth, the aerosol. That's the most important spreading way. And what we are seeing today in the unlockdown is the number of cases going up because the people are not following the guidelines for mask wearing and mask diligence. Every politician I see is talking with the mask down, even in presence of a crowd. That's a wrong message, because it is not to be used intermittently. It is to be used all the time. In the public space, you have to use it all the time. In a private space, when you're at home, you may not do it. That's the first thing that I want to highlight. The increase has to happen because the numbers will go up. But having said that, we have reduced the status of the epidemic to that of an IPL. We are looking at worldometer statistics without understanding epidemiological scientific principles. We are looking at going on testing, going on watching at the statistics and blaming politicians. And politicians are obviously, they have the pulse of the people. They want to appear to have done something. They have to be guided correctly by the technocrats, by the people that understand epidemic principles. And the epidemic principles in this are very, very clear. Dr. Shailaja mentioned very clearly the lockdown was necessary. Lockdown was necessary to sensitize people to the seriousness of the problem. Lockdown was necessary for preparation. Lockdown was necessary for logistic supplies. Lockdown was necessary for training. Lockdown was necessary for all these things. But after that, my assessment is we should have followed what the Sweden followed, the Swedish model, where they unlocked down critically. Now you're opening up restaurants, you're opening up other places. The other day I went to a CCD. I was shocked. There was a crowd of 6 students, young people, no one was with a mask, shouting garrulously. The same thing happening in Sweden. The license of that Swedish restaurant would be cancelled if that is happening. So it has to be clearly enforced regime of not being lax in the principles of prevention. And the principle of prevention is very clear. You need to have your mask in a public place. So that is important. But the next part, I would like to emphasize one. I'm worried about look at the population of India compared to USA 331 million. We are 1,382 million compared to UK, which is probably about 67 million. So we need to understand the numbers are completely skewed against us. Despite that, the total number of cases that we see are high. What is the weak link here is we do not understand how China with that level of population has kept it low. I would seriously want to understand and study that dynamic very clearly. We could have been like China, but we have not been like China. So where is the gap here? The gap, as I would, as a healthcare professional would see, what am I seeing these days in my outpatients? I'm seeing a surge of TB cases. The number of cancer patients that I have seen. Do you know why? Because they're not being seen by other hospitals. Because the other healthcare services are practically shut down. No one is doing cancer surgery. No one is doing TB care. Because patients come, see the doctor sahab to hai nahi wahan pe. They are not there. So there is a problem which is happening there, and they are desperate, running from pillar to post. So the lockdown should have been far more intelligently planned than what it has been done. You closed the hospitals, closed everything. There was no need to close the hospitals. You just need to keep them running with the staff, with clear guidelines. The UK NHS has had very clear guidelines on what should be done for elective cases, what should be done for emergency, what should be done for semi-emergency. Cancer cases should continue to get care. TB cases should continue to get care. Emergency, semi-emergency should continue to get care. We should have had these guidelines. So what have we done? On the plea of it has exposed the weakness of our healthcare system, running from pillar to post, our government healthcare system, where we should have been building on it. And this is an opportunity. I think that's the only lesson that I have for the universalization of healthcare in every medical college, district hospital should have the capacity to treat any emergency that is there in that district without them having to travel to various places. So that is an important message. I am not worried about being the corona capital. Those are numbers. It has no meaning. But from the lessons that it teaches us, build up a universalization of healthcare in a more robust manner. Build up capacity in our healthcare systems in a more robust manner. Learn what the Chinese did and see what we can do about it. And while this is being done, we should have handled the economic thing far better. The Swedish economy, people say it didn't do too well. No, Sweden is linked to European Union. They couldn't have done too well unless the European Union is also part of it. So Sweden did continue to have their restaurants and all those things running, whereas India, all the medium, small, micro enterprises, they all shut down, killing our economy for a long time to come. What I face every day in my outpatient, I'm a clinician, every day कुछ भी नहीं है, नौकरी भी चलेगी, आप ही कराओ जो करना है, आप ही माई बाप है. So आप ही माई बाप should have been the state becoming the माई बाप, looking after the welfare of these people, and that is the only plea I have. Please build up your capacity so that these poor people who have no resources, who have no salaries, who have no jobs, can be taken care of. Don't worry about being the capital or not capital. I don't care about that. I would care about what policies and principles you adopt to prevent the poor person who's affected suffering. One more message I have to give. A lot of people say, no, we can see the blue sky now. We can see the birds now. And that is a terrible way of telling somebody who's gone through a tragedy. You don't tell somebody who's had a tragedy, who's lost his mother or father, that ek kamra khali ho gaya. You don't do that. You don't do that. You don't say there is a goodness in a tragedy. No. I would say we have to learn our lessons, yes, but not over tragedy. So we should definitely have stopped the lockdown after some time and continued with the economic activities, the healthcare activities. Even today, all hospitals are not functioning to the capacity that is needed.
Right.
Need to come back.
Right.
Sorry.
Right, Dr. Varghese, I hope you will stay with us. You will stay with us. I hope that you don't have to rush to your OPD immediately. Okay, Dr. Anthony. Okay. You listened to the two previous panelists. I was going through your articles that you have contributed to various newspapers. You're talking about error in calculation. Are our figures correct? Or it is underreported? That's the question number one. And the second question, because you also talked about in one of your articles about the migrants leaving the cities, going back to their villages. I was listening to a doctor from Mumbai, and he made a very pertinent point that the people who have gone back, there is a surge of cases in rural areas as well. But because, as Dr. Betty was saying, that there is no universalization of healthcare, so once they are under grip of corona, they rush back to the city for treatment. So we have number of cases, but we do not have the numbers that how many of them are actually taking place in urban centers and how many of them are from rural centers. Dr. Anthony.
Good morning to everybody. At the outset, let me congratulate the organizers, including you, Dhananjay, and giving me an opportunity to share my ideas. Before I answer to your question about those two questions, let me just put the record straight. Though in agree generally with Madam Shailaja. I want to make a correction. Did we make some mistakes? Yes, of course, we did make some mistakes in the beginning. And let it not go hunky-dory on that, but we wasted the entire month of February instead of adequate epidemic preparedness. We were busy with Trump visit, and unfortunately there were Delhi riots. But after January 11th, WHO made it an international emergency. We still had our flights coming from China and Hong Kong to be screened only on 3 airports, that too on January 17th. Kerala had its first 2 cases in January 30th, and they were very prepared. And they have set up disaster management committee, epidemic management committees, and they had the airport screening correctly and follow and trace all the contact cases. In fact, subsequent in February, the 2 cases came from Italy, was actively traced and contained, and quarantine measures were put in place. These type of tracking and tracing contacts and putting under active surveillance with community involvement was not learned by other states. That was the biggest national calamity. Even Delhi did not take the clue from Kerala, what they have done. Later on, Maharashtra and Delhi came energetically to what has been done in Kerala. So these were opportunities lost. Our international flights were banned only on March 20th. And in February, we slept. The import of cases continued, not only from China, but Iran, Saudi, Italy, France, Spain. Who is responsible? So let it be. And finally, we embark upon all of a sudden an abrupt lockdown, which is epidemiologically, as a public health specialist, has not at all warranted. Pan-India lockdown was not warranted. You should have banned the flights, and you should have stopped import of cases, and you should have actively tracked, trace, and contain measures should have been taken up. That did not happen. March 23rd, after this, 24th of night, lockdown was announced next year onwards, and that is when India had only just 64. India had only just 9 deaths and less than 560 cases, and it was restricted to some 70 districts and 3 states: Maharashtra, Kerala, and Delhi. What was the necessity of entire mountainous Uttaranchal, Jharkhand, and tribal, entire Northeast and all to be under lockdown and all economic activities to be stopped? That was totally unjustified. It doesn't have the sanction of any epidemiologist or public health specialist. I don't know why some of the high-tech technical committee members or virologists and all haven't managed a public health episode. And that's why the organized protest by the professional associations of preventive and social medicine, Indian epidemiological organizations, and public health specialist forum, Indian Association of Public IPHA, and all protested on that. By 3 statements they have protested. So it is not, we did make errors in the beginning, let it be. Second aspect is and related to your second question. I still come to the case fatality rate later. The coronavirus never originated among the 8 crore migrants in the country. As per 2011 census, 37% population of India are internally displaced population, or we can call them migrants seeking labor. So 45 crore, as per 2011 census, they are migrants. And majority of them are poor migrants. They are crowded, and when suddenly the lockdown was announced, we hold them up as captives. You denied them wages, you denied them food, you denied them sanitation. And then the virus got implanted in them, unfortunately, and then you treated them before. These poor migrants were never to be criminalized. The police criminalized them, used lathi charge. Desperately, when they want to get out of these shanties and then walk back home, and we never had any sympathies. No government cared for them. No politicians came. Much later, even when 100 buses were arranged on UP border, it was denied to be to access to that, or for some silly reason. So these are all mistakes we have done. I'll come to the testing and rate later. Now, coming to your answering your first question, the deaths reported. See, we are making, I fully agree with Madam Shailaja and what Dr. Matthew has said about the India's huge population, and we cannot compare to Italy and Spain and France, which is a minuscule population. The denominator in India is huge. And so what we have to take that the death per million is very low, and that is true, and the case fatality rate also is low. There is a mistake in the calculation of the case fatality rate, which the ministry from 22nd May onwards, I got the figures and I see they make this error of from total cases, they put the denominator, case fatality rate, the number of deaths taking place among positive cases, which are closed. The natural history is complete. Either they recovered or died. So the denominator is a cumulative total of whenever the epidemic started from January to present, whatever the cumulative total is taken as a active denominator. And whereas it should be minusing the number of active cases. The active cases is added on, so the denominator, the active cases should have been deducted, and based on the closed cases only, the case fatality rate can be estimated correctly. And that too, because we are closing on cases which are RT-PCR positive, that is positive cases. Here, according to the ministry, it's always 2 and less than 2, which is false. It is, I have done the calculation deducting active cases, and based on the closed cases, the death rate, the case fatality rate is hovering upon 6.7 in May, and in the end of May, it became 5.6%, and 13th June, it was the last I could estimate from Government of India figures, it is 5.35. But that is because we unnecessarily expand the denominator, and that's why this error is found. Whereas in South India cases, the Hindu gives these figures of active cases and deducting active cases when you estimate. South India that way, the Telangana, end of June, it is 4.55%, and Kerala is the lowest 1%, Karnataka 2.73. It is changed now. It is Kerala. It has still further come down to less than 1, and we are finding it even Andhra Pradesh has came down to less than 2. So now only the southern state has reached that what is all India figures quoted as less than 2. Otherwise, there is an error in the case fatality rate. I'll stop at that, and
I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you, Dr. Antony. Let me go to Dr. Sylvia. Dr. Sylvia, you have studied the impact of the lockdown. Do you think that the preventive measures and the aggressive testing has come a bit late in the day? Dr. Sylvia? You have to unmute yourself, Dr. Sylvia.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, please go ahead. 3 minutes.
Yeah, okay. So basically, I think if we have to look at the pandemic and the kind of the way it's evolved, I don't think it should be as a surprise to anybody, because a pandemic is not something that you plan when it's happening or when, you know, in retrospect. It is something that you're prepared for. And all the things that have happened over the last few months is a clear indication that India is not prepared for any kind of a health, crisis, whether it's a COVID pandemic or any other kind of crisis. And I think this is a kind of throws the spotlight on the failure of the health system itself. And some of the things that really jump out is that even before we had no adequate data, and to suddenly expect magically that with COVID we'll start getting like magically very good data, I think that's it's too much of an expectation. For instance, the private sector has been notorious for not disclosing any of its data. We don't know what is the maternal deaths, what is the TB incidents or deaths due to TB, how many patients have been treated, and the same with HIV. And we also, if you look at the whole healthcare system, it is a very centralized, privatized institutions like yours, All India Institute of Local Self-Government, it plays an important role because this throws a spotlight on why a centralized corporate healthcare system is completely incapable of handling a pandemic like this. So, for example, if you take lab testing, you have most of the labs in cities, through private city labs in the cities, and then you do a public transport shutdown. You ask people not to travel. So obviously, cases, where will the people from the rural areas get tested? So obviously, you're not going to get the numbers. You're not going to get the accurate figures. And people who are traveling for even small things from a village to a city, they then become agents to transmit the disease in both ways. Also, if you look at the kind of death certificate, the documentation, it is very unreliable. Most of the doctors are not trained. And in fact, most of the deaths, I think just about 22% deaths are actually certified. And it's hugely unreliable. So for us to think that we have accurate numbers now for COVID, or that we will get, or that we can demand it only for COVID, I think it is a unrealistic expectation. And the thing that I want to also highlight is that the lockdown itself, in terms of the consequences, like if it had an impact on COVID positive cases, it also had an impact on COVID negative cases. And we can definitely expect a surge in all kinds of other conditions, whether it's nutritional related problems or maternal deaths or pregnancy complications, HIV. Basically, the entire health system has been dismantled, and the kind of people who are making decisions, like how are we going to hold these people accountable? Like, you have so-called experts and you have task forces. We don't have a public health cadre in the country, and virologists and private hospitals making decisions. And you see the kind of decisions that were made, they were clearly the contributed to the kind of surge in cases. Because prevention, Matthew said, he said there should be a regime. I don't think you should have a regime when it comes to public health. Public health is, you want to enforce something, or you want something to happen, it has to be people's participation, and that didn't happen. The kind of targeting of people, the kind of criminalization, communalization that happened, the government was happy to blame Muslims. There was so much of stigma that was taking place, and the media was adding to that. The media was extremely irresponsible. So all these things came together, and people don't want to come forward. People don't want to come forward and disclose. If you say that you have COVID or you have symptoms of COVID, you stand the risk of being discriminated, of being thrown out of your flat, of losing your job, of being beaten, of losing wages.
Right.
And then you want to impose a regime on people. That is really unfair.
Right.
And
Right.
I think this lockdown, it has catered to the middle class, but it does not cater to a lot of people who need to go out for daily wages. We've spoken to so many people, sex workers, senior citizens, daily wage laborers, who say the choice between us to either starve at home or to go and risk getting COVID. So they're not people, who are, who want to go out in spite of risks. They have to go out. So I think if we can actually look at this whole, sorry, yeah, I just finished. If you want to actually look at this experience, we need to learn. We cannot blame communities, for this. outcome. I think that is completely irresponsible. I think people who made decisions, the government, the policymakers, the so-called experts, I think they have to be held accountable. So
Right,
that's all I
right. Hold on to your thoughts. I'll come back to you again. Dr. Kundu, sorry, I for keeping you, holding you for so long. Uh, Dr. Kundu, let's talk about Delhi. It's one of the most worst performing states. Number of cases have crossed 2 lakhs. The fatalities are almost 5,000. If we look at the last 24 hours, the highest number of positive cases, that is more than 4,000. You know, somebody can say these are just numbers. Chief Minister also says, do not get afraid. Things are completely under control. We have enough beds, and if the situation worsens, then we can arrange for more. What is your assessment of the situation? There was a time when Delhi appeared to have brought things under control, but suddenly it has completely gone haywire. Dr. Kundu. You have to unmute yourself, Dr. Kundu.
Thanks, Mr. Dhananjay, and everybody in the panel. Thank you for the opportunity. Can you listen to me?
Yeah, please.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Now, so straight away I will start. I'm really enlightened with the other panelists what they're talking about, and I agree with most of them. What happened in India, and I think similar thing happens in country and Delhi also. Similar kind of thing, whether it's what do you call as lockdown or partial lockdown or health facility. Now in Delhi, health facility compared to the other places, states, is much better. I was in health department, so much better, no doubt about it. And main thing was health budget of India and Delhi. Health budget of India from after the independence also so low that those go for a infrastructure. And I think now the country has slightly woken up, and Delhi was probably the first state which had a better budget for the health and education. So that way we are lucky that slightly better than before. But Delhi has also a problem of migrants. Migrants going out and now migrants coming back because they don't have a job in the village.
You have muted yourself.
Coming back and for construction or other work. So that has added to the problem. First of all, slight unlocking. Unlocking is happening everywhere. We have to unlock for the economy. And then migrants coming back. These two have probably added. And being an NCR capital from UP, Haryana, from other places also, people are, I know personally because I'm a clinician, the people are coming from Noida, Faridabad, Gurgaon to Delhi. So Delhi hospitals are having a lot of pressure of the surrounding states also, being a part of NCR. So that's the reason why probably recently it's increased, not only in Delhi, throughout India, but Delhi has the more pressure being the capital and being by part of the NCR, and a lot of people from surrounding states are coming back, including migrants. So that's why there is I would say, a kind of second wave, I would say, and already, although we have not seen the plateau or coming down anytime, but Delhi has more this thing. But yes, Delhi's hospital facility, main thing is the death happens when there is a less amount of ICUs or hospital facility. For plain quarantine, you don't have deaths. When you have less number of ICUs or hospital facilities, then only percentage of death, the death fatality increases. In Delhi, fortunately, we had controlled somehow, but I think now we have to be very careful. We have the alarming situation where if it increases more, there might be a big pressure on the ICUs and the severe cases of COVID. And other doctors are told rightly, it has affected the other diseases also, non-COVID diseases. I know people who have died of non-COVID diseases just because there were less beds for non-COVID diseases. I know some hospitals where all the ICU beds have been booked for COVID only, big government hospitals. So there is no space for a non-COVID ICU. So anybody who is serious or who is very sick and needs an ICU in government level, there is no ventilator there.
Kind
That's
of a
the problem in
mismanagement
Delhi.
that you are talking about of the hospital
Right.
beds.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll hold on to your thoughts. I'll come back to you, Dr. Kundu. Let me take these two, Ms. Shailaja Chandra. One of a very important point that was raised, and that is the administrative decision of going for a lockdown. This has been a question a lot of people have been asking, that who were the health experts consulted before the government took this decision to go for the lockdown? Who were the epidemiologists who were consulted, virologists who were consulted, or it just happened and on a 4-hour notice the lockdown was imposed? And second, as we are talking about population, this has been the logic earlier. Now that logic is falling flat. That look at Europe, put their number together. We are more than almost similar if you put the entire number of Europe population wise, and see their fatalities rate and our fatalities. But now the thing, it seems that the game has changed completely. Ms. Shailaja Chandra. You have to unmute, ma'am.
I'm not sure whether your assessment of Europe as a continent can be taken into account. They are separate countries and they have separate fatality rates. You cannot average them all out. I don't think that that is demographically acceptable what you're saying. So please, I request you to return to the statistical way in which this is calculated. And I'm not spending time on it. I'm not a statistician, but one cannot compare several countries of a continent administered in completely different ways by different governments and compare them to India. That I think is not quite fair. Secondly, I do feel that the lockdown definitely could not have come in March. We were not even aware that this was happening. I was attending, you might say, these conversations on television, and I was asked, probably this was around late February, and I did talk to the director of the emergency medical, that is Dr. Ravindran, who is a very, very well-known person, Director EMR he's called in the Ministry of Health, which is in charge of all this airport screening. And the way he had it absolutely under his control, 3 rows in front, 3 rows at behind, anybody who had fever, then all those people had to be tested. That was being done. This is not confined to Hong Kong and China. It is going to come from other quarters, was not even recognized. And I think WHO had not even put that out as a requirement. So if the Indian government didn't do it in February, bad, yes, but it could have been much worse had they woken up in April. They at least woke up. Now, I fully agree with Dr. Antony that the way the lockdown was brought in the entire country was totally unnecessary. You had hotspots, you knew those hotspots. If those had been contained, then the possibility of going into the hinterland would have been reduced. It was not, and the migration issue was human nature. Anybody who's been in administration knows that nobody, when faced with a debacle like this, would continue to stay without money, without rations, without a future, and continue to stay in a hovel. They would run home. By hook or by crook, they'd run home. And you could not have cordoned them into a slum and said, just stay put. This is, I think, a huge failure of the administrative system. As far as your question goes about who were the people guiding this whole process, yes, I was at a loss also, because I was in touch with Dr. Gagandeep Kang, I was in touch with Dr. Srinath Reddy, with Dr. Lakshmi Narayanan, who of course gave huge numbers of millions of people and tens of millions, God knows how many people dying, which was not true. I was in touch with several people abroad also who were interested in India and have been working on India. So I do feel that the platform on which epidemiologists, infectious diseases specialists, virologists ought to have been consulted and should have been contributing. I did not see that happening. It seemed to be, to me, and this is my personal opinion, I may be wrong because I'm a retired person and I don't sort of spend my time in the Ministry of Health. I only take an intelligent and curious interest in what is happening. So please, it's a caveat, this is a personal opinion. I do feel that ICMR took on its shoulders much more than it was equipped to do. ICMR is a research body. It has never handled pandemics, leave alone not even epidemics. They are capable of doing multicentric studies, they're capable of laying standards, but they were not the people to have been making these decisions. And I think that it was the people who were in ICMR and maybe All India Institute of Medical Sciences who were given primacy over the views of epidemiologists, the infectious diseases specialists and virologists. And I wrote an article along with Dr. N.K. Ganguly. Take the trouble, please, to open the Indian Express of that time and you will find it, in which I have said exactly this. Of course, it wasn't heeded. That's another matter. I had also said that the National Institute of Biologicals ought to have been the focal point for laying standards of testing. That was not done. National Institutes of Biologicals was set up with assistance from the US precisely to be the standard setting body for all blood testing and other kinds of testing. It was not done. So I think that there was a huge, I would say that I wish they had put, and I said, I even blamed, I'm sorry, but I blamed the microbiologists and the ID specialists. They have their own associations. They never came on the table. I said, are they waiting for a place at the high table? They should be contributing on their own, waving the alarm bells as early as March. They did not do so. So writing a few letters later on is of no avail. You have to ring alarm bells to be heard. I don't think they did anything of the kind. So to pull it back into place, a lot went wrong. But for a country of this size, the fact that every district magistrate in 730 districts knows what is COVID and what is to be done. Whether they do it depends on the resources given, but they know it. The health secretaries have been on video conference every day during the months of March, April, and I don't know now, but I checked on video conference with the Union Health Secretary every day. So if Kerala is a shining example, all the examples of Kerala, including Kasaragod, were discussed. They were discussed at cabinet secretaries level along with Bhilwara. And therefore, let us not criticize just because we've got something in our hands and we feel we know it all. We don't know it all. And I think that some marks have to be given to the great work that the health workers have done despite tremendous odds.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Ms. Chandra. We must give credit to the health workers. I'm not joining, issue with you on the question of, I know you cannot compare Britain's population is different, Spain different, and so other countries, there are small countries and all that. But I remember clearly that on television debates and even in some briefings, such a comparison was made by officials. But anyway, let's put that aside. Dr. Mathew, two things. One of the important things that Ms. Shailaja has raised. Second is a question that has come from Mr. Abhishek Pandey. He says very strong words from Dr. Verghese, but relevant media and government has also acted irresponsibly in this crisis, especially healthcare and crisis management. But I would like to know the role of WHO in the whole scheme of things, how effective that has been. Dr. Mathew.
Sorry, I didn't hear the first question.
Yeah.
First question.
First question is, did you hear what Abhishek has asked you?
No, I didn't hear that.
Okay. He says, very strong words from Dr. Verghese, but relevant. Our media and government has also acted irresponsibly in this crisis, especially healthcare and crisis management. But I would like to know the role of WHO in the whole scheme of things, how effective that has been. And let me add the second question, that yesterday the leading candidate, that is Oxford, has stopped its trial because of uh, somebody falling ill after being injected. They have halted it. How big that setback is, briefly, because we are quickly running out of the time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think people have an overestimate of the role of WHO in countries. WHO can only guide central governments or state. They cannot directly guide state governments. Through the central government, they can guide the state as such. Beyond that, they only have clinical guidance, consultancy roles. Beyond that, they don't do much. So whatever they give in terms of advice, it is all there in the public domain, available on the WHO website. What are the guidelines for this? What are the guidelines for this? What are the guidelines? The point comes to decide which epidemiologists decide what was to be prioritized. And that needed to be in the public domain. I think it would have been fair on part of the government and the health ministry to make it public. Who are the epidemiologists that are guiding them? So that it's in the public domain, people know what is happening. People know who is making decisions. People know, understand the decisions, what is going to come. It shouldn't be a cloak and dagger affair. When you suddenly make a decision, you don't know what is the basis of this. So it would have been good to be transparent on this, to be to the credit. And as Dr. Shailaja said, ICMR is not proven to be a public health expert. In fact, there's a National Center for Disease Control and Prevention. One did not hear about it anywhere. I do not know. It used to be NICD, National Institute for Communicable Diseases. This is a communicable. It's been renamed. It's on the patterns of Centers for Disease Control. There's a National Disease Control disease. One didn't hear about it. One didn't hear about anything from there, which was surprising. And burden came on ICMR, which was not a competent authority for this. So WHO issues only guidelines, and one could look at the guidelines. Yes, you can flaw them on delaying the announcement of the pandemic. You can flaw them on several things in terms of, if you look at the guidelines on WHO, in fact, lockdown is not recommended anywhere. It is only quarantine that is recommended, not lockdown. Public health regimes, I must clarify here, Sylvia, when I say regimes, I wanted to look at protocols, not regime as such. The protocol that are there, for every disease, there'll be a different protocol. You can't have a standard protocol for all diseases. So for every person that is, having the disease, you have a public health expert having a policy guideline being laid down. That is all that can be done. But of course, you can flaw WHO on various other things in terms of timing, the numbers, the guidelines, the prioritization. But the governments have a decision to prioritize themselves. That's the first part of the answer that is there. The second thing that I wish to answer here is, what are the lessons learned here? I would go from that perspective. Whatever has happened, happened. You can criticize. You can criticize, this was not done, this was not done, this was not done, these were the failures. But what are the lessons that we have learned from here? We have learned that the public systems that we have, the public health, the public distribution system, the public transportation system, the public education system, all of them have weaknesses. They're not perfect. It's a large country, large population, limited resources, all have their problems. But in terms of a crisis, there is a problem. And I did a survey, telephonic survey of 5,165 persons with disabilities. Do you know the number one problem flagged by them? I asked them the question. There were several questions, a list of long questions. Number one problem, sir, khane ko nahi hai. Sir, job chali gayi hai, paise nahi hai. Two key issues. They were not worried about health. They were worried about khana. They were worried about, no jobs. That was their number. This is pan-India. Every state was covered. 5,165. This is a research that I did with my colleagues in several centers all over India. And the second thing what was found out was, when you ask them directly about psychological issues, they say no, psychological issues. When you ask them about depression, anxiety, worry, 90% of them said they are depressed or worried. That is a huge issue. So you have a population, because of this COVID lockdown, which is depressed, which is jobless, which is having hunger. We need to address that. And that is possible only through a social security system which need to be made robust. And I would appreciate if that can be done as a policy, make sure that the jobless, the migrant, the person that is indigent, impoverished can be taken care of. That's number one. The second important message is research. Research and investment in public health. Both have to be increased substantially. Because if you have one NIV in one corner of Western India and no other NIV of a similar standard and quality, we have failed. It's a large country, large population. Why can't we dream of having every region a research center of the capacity of NIV, and it merely building like they do for All India Institute of Medical Sciences? You just have to do a study and look at how many of the staff positions are lying vacant, how many faculty positions are vacant in these All India Institutes of Medical Sciences. Similarly, you have to plan upfront while you build these institutions, research centers, centers of excellence. You have to build for capacity, plan for capacity 10 years from now. So that 10 years down the line, if you have a similar epidemic, you have the expertise, you have the skills, you have the labs, you have the infrastructure ready. And while we do that, again, public education I mentioned. You talked about digital education, Zoom classes. So many of the rural students said, we don't have a smartphone. We have only one smartphone. There are 3 children at home. Only one child, the male child, gets the help. Others don't get. So how do you address with these? These are challenges which are new. We need to learn from this, and we need to plan for this to be ahead. We need to have other alternative methods of teaching and training. How do we deal with that? This is all new problems. We need to deal with that, address it, and sit together, come to a consensus. The policy consensus should be arrived with all experts, critical, non-critical. You don't need to have only people who praise you. No, have the critics also there so that everyone sits together and come to a consensus. And what is scientific, follow that. That's all I like.
Right. Thanks so much, Dr. Varghese. Dr. Antony, there is always, whenever we talk about fatalities, number of positive cases and all, there is a figure that is also thrown at you is the recovery rate. 70%, 75%, 80%. True, not everybody is going to die of this disease. There are a huge number of asymptomatic patients who recover in isolation, quarantine themselves and all. If we take the recovery rate of the patients, if that rate continues, still how long will it take to actually bring these numbers down, and what is called quote unquote flattening the curve can be achieved in your view? 2 minutes, sir.
Oh, it's little technical. What is recovery? Recovery means if you say stick to 2% is the case fatality rate, you must have a corresponding corollary of 98% recovery, which is not correct. First of all, there is a calculation error. It's about 5 to 6% is what tested positive case fatality rate. Okay, that means 95% recover. Now, why it is 65 and 70? It is a huge error. That means that is because of the calculation error of putting all the active cases into the denominator, and then you get your recovery rate low. If you say 65%, 35% are dying, so it is absolutely fallacy. For me, the fineness or accuracy of case fatality rate, because there are people suggesting the missing numbers of certified cases, you multiply by 5 times, then you get the actual case fatality rate. There are people who say you take the huge below the tip of the iceberg, the big huge iceberg, that is the community infection, that is antibody positivity rate, as seropositivity rate, as infection, and then you put that, you get your infection mortality rate, which is much, much lower than the case fatality rate now. Now, all these accuracy of fatality rate or recovery rate is just immaterial to the public. Let us come back to basics. People want 2 things. That is, one thing, if corona is so dangerous and it is an epidemic, I want to get protected. And for which now clearly from WHO to all technocrats without any dissent have agreed on 4 basic things. That is use of face mask, hand washing, cough etiquette, and physical distancing and avoid crowding. Okay, these are going to stay as long as the virus is around anywhere in the world, till this virus is eradicated from the globally, which is not going to happen in
Right.
my. Okay, then comes, this is one basics of social individual behavior, and then only if they adopt that, only the death comes. Second aspect is, if at all unfortunately I become positive, I want a system to take care of. That is, I'm tested, I'm made sure that I'm either negative or positive, and if it is positive, I want to be advised on the correct, I want to be isolated so that I do not become infectious to the others of that 85% who will recover naturally. 15% will have some complication. That 15% of those who have complication, I need some sort of a treatment support and isolation. Do you have isolation facilities there? Number 3 is, supposing I still become worse and belong to the 3% which needs ICU care. Are your intensive care units or tertiary care units are equipped enough? Are there equipments and staff, enough oxygen, enough dexamethasone, enough anticoagulants all supplied there? Are there dedicated staff there? Are those staff protected so that they feel treated, confident to treat us? Do they have PPEs? Do they have protection and they don't get
Right.
burnt out? And so there is replacement of staff, and all these things are more important.
Right. Right, Dr. Antony.
Just one more sentence, I'll say what this epidemic has threadbare exposed is the weakness of the public health system.
Right.
So
Right.
that way we have not invested in that. Our budget allocation is shamefully 1.3% of the GDP, which we have been arguing for minimum 3% all along, which hasn't happened. We
Right.
should rise up to that.
Right, Dr. Antony, you're right. These figures are absolutely correct. Sylvia, I will give you the last word, but before that, I have to go to Dr. Kundu because he has to leave for some emergency. Dr. Kundu, can you listen to me? Can you hear me?
So he was not able to wait because he had to go in an emergency.
Okay, no problem. Sylvia, you have done study in the post-lockdown period. And as Dr. Matthew was mentioning, the worries in his survey that came out, you also did a study. Does that your study confirm to what he has found, or you got some different results? Dr. Verghese, please stay for a moment. I'll come back to you for a minute. Yes, Sylvia, please go ahead.
So like I said, because of the lockdown, there have been a lot of issues that people have been facing, like cancer patients, the treatment has been, in fact, I think about 60% of cancer surgeries had been postponed. People had not been accessing pain management medicines. There were issues related to delivery, HIV treatment, tuberculosis treatment. And in terms of decision making itself, a lot of tertiary, super specialty public facilities and the private hospitals, in fact, initially, the lockdown is actually, if at all it has any purpose, it is for the health system to be able to cope when when the lockdown is lifted. But unfortunately, even the government went into lockdown at that period, and like I said, they were happy to just communalize the whole thing. So what happened is, people who were, it was not even rational care that was being given. People who were asymptomatic and who just tested positive were occupying beds almost for 14 days mandatorily, being charged at the rate of 40,000 to 50,000 per day. And people who actually needed the services, whether COVID or non-COVID, are the ones who've been running from hospital to hospital, often dying between hospitals. And also, I think it's important to realize that even till date, the government has not acknowledged that community transmission has taken place. And because of that, this whole investment into containment zones, it's in fact delayed the response, which could have happened if the government had proactively admitted that community
Right.
transmission is taking
Right,
place.
right, Sylvia. We are completely running out of time. We have, in fact, Dr. Matthew.
I have just
Just
one
one
more
minute,
point.
Sylvia. We will have another chance to talk about it. We're completely
Okay.
out of time. Dr. Matthew, just 1 minute.
Yes,
What would be your three recommendations to the
vaccine.
government?
The Oxford vaccine, there's been one mishap with one patient developing transverse myelitis. That is what we hear. But that is a serious thing. And that is the problem with vaccine trials. Just because you need to phase 3 trial doesn't mean you can release it to the public. You need to have all safety components perfectly checked out. And our suspicion as healthcare persons and history of vaccine development is it will not be before January, February that we'll have a good vaccine.
Right, right. Thank you.
Be careful.
Thank you, Dr. Matthew Varghese. I guess government has has to become more active, more proactive right now, especially now that we might have any day we might cross 100,000 figure in one day. It can cross 1 lakh. As Dr. Matthew also said, Ms. Shailaja Chandra also said that there have been steps taken, but their government needs to do more. States are doing, some states are doing very well, some states are not, but the states which are doing well also need resources, and those who are doing poorly certainly needs much more resources to deal with the existing situation. We will keep a very close eye on the development on the COVID-19 front, but for the moment, Ms. Shailaja Chandra, Dr. Matthew Varghese, Dr. Anthony, and Dr. Sylvia, and Dr. Kundu as well. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. See you all next Thursday, same time. Thank you.
Thank you.